Good morning, or depending on when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice radio. So today, I'm going to show you round one from an expanded league challenge that we had in Sheffield in the UK. Quick shout out and thank you to PokerSock Sheffield. I will hopefully be able to put a link to them in the description. They are the lovely people who allowed us to record. Just letting you know, we are in the expanded format here, which means we are black and white to Ancient Origins, and due to time constraints on the day, we are playing single game. Round one features a lovely chap called Charlie Powell, who very regularly turns up to Worlds, and he is going to be playing Night March. And the lovely Joe Bernard, no slouch himself, he is going to be playing Fighting Bats. Ladies and gentlemen, this one's going to be awesome. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so here we have Charlie Powell on the left, we have Joe Bernard on the right, and Charlie is going to be playing Night March, and Joe is going to be playing Fighting Bats. Just a reminder, we are in the expanded format here, which means we are going black and white on. Charlie is a Worlds competitor from... he's played a few times before, and Joe, let's say he is no slouch either. So, we start off, it looks like Joe has won the flip. He started off with a Landorus, gets another one down. Charlie's got a Joltik on the bench and a Mew EX in the active. Now, I played Charlie earlier in the day, and I can confirm that there are no Mr. Mimes in Charlie's deck. So, something like a Landorus is going to... He's going to eat those Joltiks for breakfast. Remember, Landorus for just 1 energy hits Joltik or anything on the bench for 30 damage, and Joltik has only 30 HP. So that is going to be a problem for Charlie as we go through this game. But of course, these Night March decks can be very, very good at one-hitting EXs very early on, so maybe Landorus might have to take 2 prizes in one turn to save him actually ending up being a bad play, because if Charlie can just one-hit KO a Landorus in one turn, and Landorus only takes 1 prize and does some damage to the active, that's actually going to be a better turn for Charlie there. So Joe gets Corinna. He uses that to search for a Hawlucha and a level ball, and he uses a level ball to get a Zubat. Now, Zubat's going to be very, very useful against Night March here, because of course a Crobat doing 30 damage, or placing 3 damage counters, will KO a Joltik. It's going to mean that that Mew that's only got 120 HP to begin with, the HP comes down faster and faster, and stuff like Pumpkaboo on the bench doesn't last long with bats coming down as well. And that Hawlucha, remember, 60 damage for 1 energy, plus you got Strong Energy, Muscle Band, and Fighting Stadium to add to that damage. He can take Mew out quite quickly. So Charlie starts off, he's got a Trainer's Mail, he gets a Juniper, and that's good because it means he's going to have something going. One thing I love about the expanded format is that you can make a deck that just runs. Dead hands don't happen like they used to. So we see an Ultra Ball there getting rid of a Floatstone and a Lysandra, and presumably here he's going to be going for some kind of Night Marcher, maybe to put on the bench as a spare, quite possibly just to put in his hand so that he can discard it with Juniper, or he might be going for an Archeops here, because I'm pretty sure Charlie does play Archeops. We should see as the game goes along. He's going to need to get that Archeops out. And he's gone for a Shaman instead, so what he's going to try and do here is draw more cards and then go ahead and discard with Juniper or Sycamore to really get a bunch of cards drawn and get going here. If Charlie can get the Archeops, that would be huge, because it means that Joe would then not be able to get those bats out doing that extra damage. So we see a Dimension Valley and a Muscle Band, that's quite good. And the Shaman comes down for 5. Which is very nice indeed. So we get a Super Rod, we get a Night Marcher, we get a second Night Marcher. This Sycamore is going to suck though, because you saw that he drew 2 VS Seekers there, and I believe the only supporter in his discard is Lysandra. So, having one of those down and 2 VS Seekers, it's not ideally what you want to get rid of, but he has managed to get a Lampent and a Joltik in the discard. So there's 40 damage for Night March before we get going. So it's not the end of the world here. Although it does look like he's drawn into 2 Lampents. An Ultra Ball would be excellent to discard both of them, but you don't really want Lampents in your hand. You want them in the deck so you can use Battle Compressor to discard them from the deck. I think, yeah, he's got 2 Lampents in hand now, which is not ideal. And we see a Pumpkaboo going on the bench as another Night Marcher. You never really want the Lampents in hand unless you're going to Juniper or Ultra Ball. What you really want to do is keep them in the deck to Battle Compressor them out. Although, even after a Shaman for 5 and a Sycamore, we still haven't seen a Battle Compressor from Charlie. So hopefully he's going to put the Night Marchers off to one side, as I believe we saw Ryan do in a previous game. Now, the good news here is that Mew with Dimension Valley can attack for 1 energy. Now, what he's actually chosen to do there is use a Mew to copy Shaman's setup to do 30 damage, 50 with the Muscle Band, for a single energy now that Dimension Valley is in play. And that takes the Mew off the board. It takes an easy KO away from Joe, and that's a really good thing. The other thing it's done is he's put a Pumpkaboo in the active. Pumpkaboo, remember, has a resistance to fighting, so Landorus, as is, will only be doing a base of 10 damage to Pumpkaboo, and that ain't enough. He will KO the Joltik, but again, if he does 10 damage to Pumpkaboo and KOs the Joltik, and then Charlie's able to get a Night March KO on the Landorus, that puts Charlie ahead in that particular exchange. So we see Joe going here. I think he's going for a second Corinna, I believe. I could be wrong about that, but there's a Corinna in the discard pile, so I believe that's what he's going for. And we see a Hawlucha there, and in terms of the item, I mean, he might be going for a Muscle Band here, or he might be going for a Computer Search, but he's going instead for an Ultra Ball. And the Ultra Ball getting rid of the 1 fighting energy and the Hawlucha. Hawlucha's really good potentially against Shaman and against Mew. It can get a 1-hit KO for 1 energy. But he needs a Shaman, he needs to draw some cards. And that's one downside of Corinna. Although you are, you're getting a Pokemon and you are getting a item, you're not really drawing any cards. So Golbat comes down, does 20 damage, brings Pumpkaboo down to 40 HP, and here comes the Shaman. It would be nice if he could get another Zubat down here. And right on cue, we see another Zubat. So thank you, Joe. You appear to be listening to me. So that's a potential of 50 damage from Bat's next turn if he can hit a Crobat and a Golbat. Now, an interesting thing he's done there is he's put the Pumpkaboo on 30 damage, which means a Crobat that drops 3 damage counters will KO a Pumpkaboo next turn, or if the Pumpkaboo leaves the active, he'll be able to KO it with the residual damage from a Hammerhead on the bench, because remember that when Hammerhead hits the bench, it doesn't take account of resistance. So there is a possibility here, let's say that, Charlie drops a Joltik here, there could be a 2-prize turn coming up. So there comes a Juniper. Oh, and he's got... Now that's when you do want 3 Lampent in hand. Although Charlie is going to need a double colourless energy here to get a Night March attack off. Unless he wants to attack with Mew. It doesn't look like he's drawn any energy there, which is not good. Pumpkaboo, remember, attacks for a DCE if you've got Dimension Valley out, and we finally see our first Battle Compressor. Mew, on the other hand, attacks for a single energy when you've got Dimension Valley out, or a double colourless when you don't, but you don't really want a Mew in the active. Hawlucha does 60 damage to an EX straight off the bat. You combine that with 1 strong energy, a Muscle Band, and a Fighting Stadium. Now you're doing 120 damage, and that Hawlucha could potentially 1-hit KO a Mew or a Shaman. So Charlie doesn't really want to leave EXs in the active. Pumpkaboo's a really good one to have in the active because not only does he resist Landorus, but he can't be hurt by Hawlucha. Although one option that Joe would have would be to either KO the Pumpkaboo with a Sky Return on Shaman, although one would assume he probably doesn't play DCE in this particular build. Most of the fighting decks don't. The other thing he could do is take advantage of Charlie's own Dimension Valley, and he could do 30 damage with a Crobat for 0 energy, because Crobat does 30 damage to any Pokemon for 1 energy, but it's a colourless energy, and Dimension Valley reduces the attack cost of all psychic Pokemon by a single colourless energy. So Charlie's playing his Battle Compressor here, and he really needs to get rid of as many Night March Pokemon as he can. Apparently there are no more that he can afford to get rid of, because remember, he needs some in order to be able to attack. And we saw him kill his Super Rod on turn 1 with a Juniper. Or a Sycamore, probably a Sycamore. But he gets his Maxies in the discard, so the question is, can he pull off a Maxies this turn? If he can pull off a Maxies this turn, he would have to empty his hand completely of all but Maxies. He could then get an Archeops out as if it were a basic Pokemon, and that means no evolution from Joe here. Now, he's put an energy on the Mew, which means he's going to be attacking with a Mew next turn, which means a Landorus can KO that Pumpkaboo with the residual damage from Hammerhead, the bench damage, if you will. Oh no, he's just passing the turn and leaving the Pumpkaboo active. So Charlie did not have a great turn there. Ideally, he would have got a DCE and KO'd the Landorus with the Pumpkaboo. That clearly didn't happen. So, and there goes the Crobat and there goes the Pumpkaboo. And that was a brilliant thing for Joe there. Of course, taking a prize mid-turn is awesome. Now Charlie has got to put an EX Pokemon up. And with some switch shenanigans here, as I've said, we could see a KO here coming from Joe. Now, there was no good thing to put up there. Oh, and there goes a Head Ringer to increase the attack cost of Mew by 1. Mew going up means he can attack next turn. The chances of that Mew going down are fairly slim. Although, Mew is weak to Psychic, so with that Dimension Valley out, that Crobat will actually be doing 60 damage. So this Golbat could do 20 damage, bringing Mew down to 100 HP, which would then allow Joe to, if he had a Muscle Band, do 100 damage and actually get the KO with the Crobat. Of course, he would need to get the Landorus out of the active in order to do so. Doesn't really make a huge difference unless Joe can pull off the Crobat attack there. If Joe can pull off the Crobat attack, then that could maybe see the Mew being in the active as a mistake. But then, if the Shaymin's in the active and doesn't get killed, Charlie's got to get the Shaymin out of the active in order to get a Night March off. And it's going to take a fair bit to get the KO here. Now, what Joe really wants is a Muscle Band and a Switch. That would be the absolute ideal here, but getting both of them from a single Corinna, not ideal. So we see the Lucario coming out. Muscle Band Switch would be crucial here, because it would mean, like I say, he could do 100 damage to that Mew and get the KO, and that would, of course, be fantastic. Pulling off a KO on an EX to go down to 2 prizes remaining without using an EX would be wonderful. So we see the Muscle Band there. Does he have... Now the other thing, of course, is that these Bats decks often play Super Scoop Up. If he's got a Super Scoop Up, now I don't know why he's putting the energy down. Has he missed that Dimension Valley? Because remember, Dimension Valley reduces your attack cost by 1. What he would, however, be able to do is put a Fighting Stadium in play, and he hasn't actually done that, so he does 50 damage, putting him on 70 in total. And it is a shame that he didn't have the it is a shame that Joe didn't have the Switch Muscle Band combination there. That would have been pretty gosh darned awesome. Because Mew, of course, is weak to Psychic. But having said all of that and gone through all of that, spiel there, Joe is still very much in command of this game. He had the better start. He's ahead by 2 prizes. That Mew is down to 50 damage. So, Joe's in a very, very good position here. Although if he's not putting down a Fighting Stadium, then that fighting energy on the Crobat was a waste, because remember, Dimension Valley works for both sides, so Crobat could have had a free attack there. Charlie's deck, we can see, is getting very, very slim. He's still got a route to winning this game. He just needs to Night March 3 turns in a row. He can win this game in just 3 turns. So we see 2 Pumpkaboos and a Joltik going down, and then we get the Maxies, because he empties his hand. VS Seekers for the Maxies. Out comes the Archeops onto his bench, and he gets to draw 5 cards. No more bats for Joe here. And that is, of course, huge, because, a Crobat coming out could knock out that Joltik on the bench. Of course, that Landorus needs to go down, and Charlie needs to hope that Joe doesn't have a muscle band next turn, because that Mew has now got 50 HP remaining and that Joltik's got 30 HP. That means that one Landorus with a muscle band could KO the Mew and the Joltik, leaving just a single prize for Joe to take to win the game. And that could be taken, even by something like a Crobat or something like that. So, the big question here is, firstly, Charlie's going to need another energy. That DCE is going to have to be used in order to get off an attack. Now, we also don't know how many Night Marches he's got in the discard pile. And it looks like we saw another setup from the Mew, so that was a really nice play from Charlie there. And again, the Pumpkaboo goes active, because it's really awkward for Joe to KO a Pumpkaboo, especially now that bats have been turned off. So the Focus Sash comes down on the Landorus. That's huge, because Night March loves one-hit KOs, and there's no one-hit KO on a Landorus that has a Focus Sash attached. But the free prize turn has disappeared now. That was a really nice play from Charlie there, using Mew to copy Shaymin's setup and get him off the field of play. And, of course, he gets rid of the Head Ringer as well in the process. Now, there is a prize coming from Joe here. That's going to happen. Now, we see a Sycamore coming down, getting rid of a VS Seeker, which kind of sucks, but is inevitable. He's at the stage of the game where just using a Corinna every turn isn't going to cut it. Now, that strong energy would put the Hammerhead up to 70 to the active, which still isn't enough, because the resistance will bring it down to 50 and not get a KO. And there's no bats coming down, not with Archeops on the field. You just can't play the Crobat. So an awkward position here. It wouldn't be the end of the world for Joe to just Hammerhead here. It's inconvenient. Now here he's going up to 50. If Charlie were to get off a Night March here, and we know he's going to get off a Night March. We saw him use setup. We saw him put the DCE into his hand. So we know that there's a Night March coming here. I'm wondering the point of putting down that strong energy on the Landorus, purely because there isn't really much difference. Oh, no, I lied to you. There is a big difference between, and here comes an N. No, I was going to say there isn't much difference to having the Pumpkaboo having 10 or 30 HP left, but that's if you can use Crobat, or if he's on the bench, in which case he's killed by a Crobat or a Hammerhead to the bench regardless. But of course, if we look at the Landorus that's currently on the bench, he's only doing 10 damage to an active Pumpkaboo. Now, the other option for Joe would be that he could actually use the Crobat to take out the active Pumpkaboo rather than the Landorus, and then he could have used the strong energy on the bench Landorus, trying to build up, ready for a... If anyone's wondering, that is a... Is it a Shuppet? I believe it's a Shuppet, which has got an attack which knocks off a special energy from the active. Really good against stuff like Giratina EX and Seismitoad EX. So what Joe could potentially have done here was to put the energy on the Landorus and then use the Crobat to attack for free to take out the Pumpkaboo next turn. If he'd have done that, he actually could have free energy on that bench Landorus by now. But of course, as with all of these things, if you do something different, so does your opponent. Let's say Joe had put free energy on that Landorus by this stage with the Focus Sash. Charlie may well be starting to really hunt that one down, Lysandre up and try and kill it. Although we've seen at least one Lysandre free VS Seeker from Charlie. So here comes an Acrobike, and we got a Xerosic, and that's his last VS Seeker, so we had to take it. He's going to get a couple prizes this turn, you would imagine. Here's another Acrobike, Ultra Ball, or that Trainer's Mail? Trainer's Mail. So he's digging for something here. He's got the attack, and with Landorus only having 90 HP left, we've got the KO here. So that strong energy, depending on what he does now, could have been a superfluous attachment. I would like to have seen it on the bench Landorus, because if you've got a Landorus that can come out and land Judgment, then that's awesome, especially if you've got a Focus Sash attached, so he ain't going down the following turn. At least not without some kind of startling megaphone to get rid of the Focus Sash. Now, here, it becomes a really good thing. And this is like I say a lot. It really comes down to how you're playing the game and what happens later. Earlier in the game, that fighting energy on the Crobat could have seemed superfluous. Now, it actually has turned into a really nice play, because now that the Dimension Valley has gone, and that really upsets Charlie, who now needs another Dimension Valley and a DCE, although it looks like he's got them both, to attack with a Pumpkaboo. And now the energy on the Crobat's a really good thing, because Joe has the opportunity to attack with Crobat for 30 damage. Now Joe, he's in a really good position here. We know he's got a strong energy in hand, and we know he's got that Hawlucha on the bench. So in theory here, if he can find a Lysandre, he wins next turn. Hawlucha, remember, does 60 damage, goes up to 80 with a strong energy, and he hits through resistance because of his ability. Shaman's got 80 HP left. Oh, computer search is a nice thing to draw for Trainer's Mail, although Charlie is getting very low on resources. If Joe's got a Lysandre next turn, he's got the win. Because either the Landorus doesn't get KO'd, he puts a strong energy on the Landorus and kills the Shaman, or the Landorus does get killed, and then the Hawlucha with a strong energy kills the Shaman. So Charlie, the game is out of Charlie's hands at this stage. The best he can do is KO the Landorus this turn, and remember that Focus Sash, he needs to get rid of it, or else he is not getting a KO here. If he can get rid of the Focus Sash, and then you have a Lysandre KO next turn, he will win the game. Now, we know he's seen his 4VSC, because I believe we've only seen one Lysandre, so presumably he's got a second. Sorry, we haven't seen them all, because he drew one from the Acrobike and never played it. Now there's a 06 coming out to get rid of the Focus Sash, and that's what he needed. That's a lovely play from Charlie there. He didn't have the startling megaphone, so he uses his last VS Seeker to get a 06 to get rid of the Focus Sash. Yeah, it's a pain in the neck, but you know what? It totally works. So here, if Joe top decks a Lysandre, and he has, I'm fairly sure that was a Lysandre in his hand there. And spoiler alert, I was stood next to Joe at this point in the game, so I know it was a Lysandre. He's got the win. We know he's got strong energy in hand. We saw it last turn. We know he's got Lysandre. He just drew it. Trust me, he did. All he needs to do is attach strong energy, Lysandre up the Shaman, and boom. He does 80 damage, goes through resistance, KOs a Shaman, and Joe goes to 1-0 and moves on to round 2. And there goes the Fighting Stadium, and there goes a Corinna. Yep. Now, he's got to really... And there's a Scoop Up Cyclone, which is kind of useful, because he can get the Shaman out. Next turn, if Charlie is able to get a KO on his bench Shaman next turn, he's got the win. Now, to be fair, he's going to need a DCE. Now, the DCEs were late coming. I can't remember if he's used them all or not. If he can get a DCE on that Mew, we know he's got enough Night Marches in the discard pile, and the Shaman comes off, so that's a good thing. Now he can't get the win next turn. He was going to retreat into the Crobat and kill the Pumpkaboo. Now, if Charlie's got an N here, because there's no 2-prize turn coming off, if Charlie has got a DCE and an N, he's got the DCE, this could be a huge turn for Charlie. If he can get over the Crobat and N Joe, Joe has nothing, he ain't taking down that Mew, and... Oh no, sorry, Charlie hasn't got a Night Marcher. That's quite a big thing, which I should have mentioned when the Pumpkaboo went down. Charlie needs a Night Marcher on the bench, or else he can't attack. Because remember, Mew's just copy. I mean, he can attack, but he can't attack with Night March, and he needs to attack with Night March. So ideally here, Charlie's got a Night March. It looks like he's got a Joltik in hand, which is a really dodgy thing to put down. But Joe's lost 2 Landorus. Joe can't evolve into Crobat, so we're looking all right here. Now, an N for Charlie would be wonderful here. Can he computer search? Now, if he's got an N left, and with his deck, there's a good chance he doesn't. If he's got an N, and he doesn't have an N, unfortunately. If he had an N, that would be wonderful. Because then he could end Joe down to 1 card, KO the Crobat, and essentially win the game. But there is no N, and now he's still got the strong energy, he's still got the Lysandre, he can still get the KO. And he's seen it. He grabs a Shaman. There's the strong energy, and he's got the KO for the win. Turn later than he needed to, close game in the end, two really good players, two interesting decks. I, for one, thoroughly enjoyed that game, and I'm rather hoping you did too. Round 2 will be coming up in the very near future, so make sure you check that one out. We are in an expanded tournament. We got at least 3 more games coming, so look out, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be fun. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.